Vriska Burger, the image that defined a generation of gamists. One of the most important works in the entirety of the human canon. It recently received a quote-unquote remaster, as you might have heard. When we look at this image, however, something is extremely clear. The soul is totally gone. It's basically a different piece entirely. It looks far worse in every regard. What was the point of such a thing? Why not simply repost the original Vriska Burger? What was the purpose of decrunching the image? Though the hypothetical I just proposed is inherently silly by its very nature, it's something that I've come to see with video games time and time again. It's strange with any art form, this idea that a work of art could be wholly replaced by a later work of art, that a newer iteration on similar ideas is inherently better. You see it occasionally with movies, with director's cuts being kind of a terrible practice generally speaking, perpetuating the idea that any one artistic voice is the most important on the project and that they should be the only one whose opinion matters. There are those extended editions of Lord of the Rings people often say are the only way to watch them, even though there are some pretty damn good reasons to prefer the original theatrical cuts, in particular the fact that a lot of the additional scenes don't really do much. Despite the fact that it certainly does occur with movies as I just outlined, it's definitely an issue we see in the gaming sphere more than any other artistic medium. People are always debating definitive versions of games, which versions should be played over the other ones, as if there are versions that aren't worth studying. Games are often ported and re-released with extra stuff grafted onto them just for the sake of having more stuff, and people see that as quote-unquote definitive. After all, aren't games just supposed to be endless piles upon piles of content for you to engage with until you expire? When the, frankly, pretty terrible Final Fantasy Pixel remasters came out in 2021, this was what I saw a lot of the discussion surrounding. They had less content than the GBA releases from the early 2000s. Again, I don't really care for the Pixel remasters in general, but it's not because they removed the shitty dungeons from the re-releases. It's because of a verisimilitude of factors that mostly have to do with how they butchered the aesthetic direction when Square Enix stuck themselves between a new art direction and faithfulness for no apparent reason, which I have detailed before. But I found so often that the discourse was instead about a lack of the repetitive GBA dungeons that were added on for no reason other than padding in those re-releases, which to me seems like such a nothing thing to get hung up on. Those were added on a whim and they were removed on a whim. They are noticeably appended in nature. The way gamers talk about new content like it's a requirement for a re-release of a game isn't the worst form of gaming discourse surrounding re-releases though. It's pretty fucking annoying, but the worst is when you have a case like another Metroid 2 remake or Resident Evil 1 remake. Now, on their own, both of these games are totally fine. I don't take any issue with their existence, and in an artistic vacuum, I tend to prefer this remake approach of trying to do something unique with the original text, because that's far more fascinating than just adding more text onto the old text in a forced fashion. The way fans discuss them, however, is what makes me upset. People speak as if they are replacements for the originals, that there's no reason to ever play the original experiences because these remakes exist that update them to modern standards. There's more to a game than whether or not it's in line with our contemporary artistic ideas. Metroid 2, for instance, is such a beautiful and cerebral game. Haunting spaces demarcated by pea soup alien green, the violence of the machine personified through harrowing and isolating treks through the planet's tunnels. That atmosphere is totally lost in AM2R, which sought fit to try and make Metroid 2 more like Super Metroid, because Super Metroid makes for a more fun and streamlined game experience. It's fine, but it's not what Metroid 2 was, and that's why I find it grotesque when people say that it's just a better version of Metroid 2. My feelings are less strong regarding Resident Evil Remake. The original Resident Evil just also has a totally different aesthetic direction it's going for, and while I appreciate Remake's different approach, I find it pretty shitty that people act as if it's a straight-up replacement. I've met multiple people who have stated directly that there is no reason to ever play the original Resident Evil, even though they're totally different. This is even more prevalent in the space of remastered ports. Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green stripped the original Game Boy works of their identity and homogenized them to be like the Gen 3 games of the time, removing all the quirks that made them so distinct. all the bugs and strange mechanics, all the weird aesthetic choices that were defined by the Game Boy's low computing power, all removed in favor of just being Ruby and Sapphire, but this time it's in Kanto. Ocarina of Time for 3DS softened the art direction significantly, even if the quality of life changes are admittedly nice. I don't think a less annoying water temple is worth it, however, for the significantly more saturated take on the affair. Remakes are artistic violence in this sense, the reactionary idea that there is some objective artistic standard which is just whatever is most palatable to contemporary gamists, and that you have inherently improved the work by making changes to it. It is taken as some unequivocal, unquestionable good when Aim2R makes Metroid 2 more like Super Metroid, because Super Metroid was the one people liked. It's appalling to me, a trend that doesn't respect the fact that each aspect of a game is part of the tapestry that makes it what it is, and that to change any of that, you're fundamentally making it a different work. When you add an extra dungeon to Final Fantasy VI's postgame in the GBA version, you are completely changing how people interact with that text, even if they are deliberately avoiding it. After all, that's another aspect they have to consider, the fact that they need to deliberately avoid that aspect of the text. It's not an improvement to randomly add an extra dungeon, you're just painting random stuff on top of the artist's work. Reinterpretations of works are fine. Creating your own artistic vision building on someone else's is as old as humanity. But the idea that your take on a work can replace the original is just gross to me. This has been Arcade Everlasting, who can't really think of a remake she likes that much off the top of her head, signing off. Thank you for watching.